The NBA playoffs are here, and we all know playoff mode is a thing. Listen to the evidence. Playoff crowds are going wild. Playoff players are lighting up the court. Even your speakers are in playoff mode. Okay, we'll take it down a notch, but just a notch, because this is the Turn It Up to 11 NBA playoffs. Playoff mode is clearly a thing. The NBA playoffs presented by Google Pixel continue on ABC, ESPN, TNT, and NBA TV.
At the UPS Store, we know things can get busy this upcoming holiday. You can count on us to be open and ready to help with any packing and shipping or anything else you might need.
Is there anything you can't do?
Actually, I don't have a good singing voice. The UPS... Nope. But our certified packing experts can pack and ship just about anything.
At least that's good.
The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. Come in today to get your holiday goodies there on time.
It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. So glad you could be with us for the next hour. Dottino and Matt Citak with you, and we are talking Giants football. 201-939-4513. You can also go hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. Now, I thought today, since the draft was just this past week, and we've taken a lot of calls the first couple of days, and we'll take a bunch of calls today too. I mean, I want you folks to get in and let us know exactly what you thought about the draft, but I wanted to broaden the scope just a tad, Matt, just a tad, because in my opinion, the NFC East did extremely well in this draft. Now, we all believe, I mean, the Giants got value and need. It looks like their 6-member draft class is even going to give them a lot of production right away. We anticipate this to be a good draft, 2024 for the Giants. But I will also say that the tide raised all boats in the NFC East, because the Philadelphia Eagles, Washington Commanders, and Dallas Cowboys all can say the same thing, which means this draft on its own probably didn't do much to shuffle the power in the division.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head there. I mean, the Giants draft, arguably, very strong. They addressed multiple positions of need. And, as we've talked about, as John and I talked about earlier in the week, it was a good marriage between value and need for pretty much all of their picks. So the Giants definitely did get better from this past weekend. But as you mentioned, so did the other 3 teams in the division. All 4 teams came out of the draft, I would say, pretty significantly better. And a lot of the media, members of the media, analysts that have been putting out these grades or rankings for all draft classes around the league agree. I mean, Dane Brugler, the author of The Beast, I think safe to say is one of the top draft media minds out there, had all 4 NFC East teams in the top 10 of his draft class rankings that just came out earlier this week.
Well, it's not just that these teams got good players, but they also filled holes.
Yeah.
Which is the double win, right? That's the daily double. That's the exacta, when you're able to do both at the same time. All right, so let's quickly just take a look at exactly what the other teams in the division did and their goals going in. And again, looks like they met them. We'll start with Philadelphia, since they've been the beast of the division now for a few years. Think about this, right? They go in knowing that their secondary was old, slow, banged up, clearly the weakest part of their squad. And what do they do with their first 2 picks, Matt? What do? They get 2 guys who were highly thought of in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And could it have fallen any better for them?
No, honestly, it could not have, because just those 2 guys alone, not even looking at the rest of the guys, those 2 guys alone.
That's a win-win right there.
there were so many rumors and rumblings leading up to the draft that the Eagles were going to move up in the first round in order to land Quinion Mitchell. They end up staying at number 22, and he falls right to them. So that's one big need right there. And then with Cooper DeJean, people were pretty surprised that he fell out of the first round, that he was even available for them in the second round.
At 40.
I believe they moved up in the second round to land him at 40. But yeah, just those first two picks alone, the secondary was arguably the biggest hole on the Eagles roster, and they filled it in an amazing way with those two players.
Now, there seems to be a little bit of an indecision amongst the people at the Combine, and we've heard them also talk about DeJean over the course of the last couple of months on the show. Is he a corner or is he a safety? Look, either way, he helps their secondary.
Oh, yeah.
That's the bottom line. So it's still a great pick for them, regardless of what position he finally lands at. Now, we look at pick number 3, Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian University. He's an edge rusher. They get him at number 94. All right. I'll be honest with you. I hardly know anything about him other than what I read because I did not do any work up on him. But he's an edge rusher, and we know how Philadelphia usually cultivates their pass rush. So just going off of how successful they've been with those kinds of guys, chances are he's probably going to be pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, I think his name might not be as well known just because he went to Houston Christian, obviously not a very big school, but I remember, after Mobile, Senior Bowl, there was a lot of talk and a lot of buzz surrounding Jalix Hunt as don't sleep on this guy just because he's a small school prospect. He could end up being a very good NFL player and, landing in the third round. Clearly the Eagles agreed with that. They saw enough in him to use a day 2 pick on him, and I mean, we'll see if they're able to develop him into, the next great Eagles pass rusher.
Who knows?
They've got a good group of guys surrounding him, so he's not going to have too much pressure as a rookie.
Exactly. So, they could certainly get some production out of him. The other 2 picks I just wanted to mention, they get Will Shipley, the running back out of Clemson. Now, it doesn't hurt any running back room that has Saquon Barkley in it. And we know from the time when he was here, you have to protect yourself and make sure you've got some more bodies in that room because you don't know how many games and how many snaps he's going to play. So they get themselves a quality running back in the 4th round, which is the sweet spot for running backs in this draft.
Yep.
And they got a good one from a power program. And they also pick up Jeremiah Trotter from the same Clemson program and the son of a former Eagles linebacking legend. Now, whether or not Trotter even comes close to the kind of career that his dad had is irrelevant. In my opinion, the Eagles' linebacking core was not very fast, did not have a lot of range, and I also thought that was one of the reasons why their defense went downhill last year. It was the secondary first, the linebackers second. And whether or not he becomes a star, he is a 5th-round pick, and you certainly know the intangibles are going to work in his favor, and we'll see if these 2 players wind up giving them some production.
Yeah, I mean, to see the name Jeremiah Trotter and see land with the Eagles brings back some not so great memories from growing up watching his father play against the Giants for nearly a decade, whether it was with the Eagles or with Washington. But I think that was a very solid pick for the Eagles. I think the only reason why Trotter dropped to the 5th round was because he doesn't have that ideal size you would want for a linebacker. I think if he were a little bigger, he would have gone a lot sooner, probably somewhere in the mid to late day 2 range. Will Shipley, as you mentioned, very talented. I would just say offensive playmaker. I wouldn't be surprised if they use him all over the offense, whether it's this season or moving forward. He's a good pass catcher. I don't think he's going to be just used exclusively as a running back. I thought, the Giants were going to potentially have some interest in Shipley because we all assumed that the Giants were going to add a running back at some point in the draft, which they did in Tyrone Tracy. But I thought Shipley could have been in the mix. I also think 2 of the other day 3 picks were very interesting, and the 2 wide receivers that they selected, Enos Smith and Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. Obviously, day 3 picks, day 3 wide receivers. I don't think anyone's expecting them to come in day 1 and, be Pro Bowlers.
Well, Wilson could wind up being the tight end as well.
Yeah, because he's a big guy. But those 2 picks stood out a little bit on day 3. I think those could, if given time to grow and develop in Philadelphia, could end up being very solid picks. But the thing that impressed me the most about the Eagles draft is they came away with this big group, this huge draft class, very talented players. But on top of that, Howie Roseman was able to pick up 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks in next year's draft.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of trades that the Eagles did this past weekend to still emerge from the draft with this strong draft class and 3 mid-round picks in next year's draft. Just got to tip my hat to Howie Roseman.
Philly had to get younger and quicker, and they've done that. And in addition, as you said, they stockpiled some stuff for 25. All right, a little quicker now. We go to Dallas. I look at the first 5 picks of their draft, and I'm like, boy, they got to be really happy with this, right? Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle, Oklahoma. Cooper Beebe in the 3rd round out of Kansas State, a really burly, tough-minded, blue-collar guard. Marshawn Nealand, the edge rusher out of Western Michigan, again, smaller program, but don't sleep on him as an edge rusher. So, they have to be very happy with those picks right out of the box, and I'm sure that Stephen Jones had a lot to do with that because he's the one who wanted to rebuild that offensive line years ago. You know what I'm saying? So, I can't see it, John.
They're going to play BB at center.
Oh! John says they're playing BB at center. He's already read up what the Cowboys are talking about. So, they get 2 offensive linemen. They get an edge rusher, so obviously front 7 and trenches. Okay, the big boys up front. This is what Stephen Jones has been preaching now for a decade. And the reason why, when they stopped listening to Jerry, the Cowboys started to draft better. Because Stephen Jones understands you've got to be good in the trenches. I thought Kalen Carson was a good value pick in the 5th round at the corner out of Wake Forest. And is it Liufau? The linebacker out of Notre Dame. I did not do any work on him. He was a 3rd round pick at number 87. We know they need linebacker depth. So, think about that. That's 5 guys right there. All 5 of those guys could give them something.
Yeah, going into the draft, it's no secret that the Cowboys' biggest need was the offensive line. I think everyone knew that 1st round pick was going to be on an offensive lineman and that at least one of the other top picks was also going to be on another one, and that's exactly what they did with Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe. I think both of those guys could honestly end up starting day 1 for the Cowboys. I do think Guyton would be better if he had a little bit more time to develop. I think he's still a little bit raw.
Not in the NFL.
But no,
they rush you in as soon as they can.
A 1st round pick on the offensive line, especially with the Cowboys needing offensive linemen, he's going to be thrown right into the fire on day 1. But they did definitely address the offensive line, which was probably their biggest need. The one thing that kind of stood out to me about the Cowboys draft that I remember from the weekend was I thought it was a little strange going into day 2. Jerry Jones was openly talking about how much they liked Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of Texas.
Didn't happen.
And obviously running back was a big need for them. He went on and on raving about how much they loved him, and then sure enough, someone moved up in the 2nd round. I think it was the Panthers, moved up in the 2nd round to take Brooks before the Cowboys could get their hands on him. And they ended up addressing the running back position after the draft when they brought back Ezekiel Elliott. So maybe that was their plan all along. But just seeing the Panthers move up to sneakily take Jonathan Brooks away from the Cowboys, it did make me chuckle a little bit.
All right, finally we go to the Dallas Cowboys. And again, I look at their draft and their first 6 players. The Commanders, Washington Commanders, I'm sorry. Their first 6 players, they're probably going to get something out of all 6 of these guys. Seriously. Now, Jaden Daniels, the quarterback at LSU, to me, that's the one real risk-reward pick that they took. Okay? I would not have taken him there, but they felt like they had to get a franchise quarterback. They think he's that guy, so they got him. Okay, wonderful. We'll see how that works out. The rest of them, Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois, round 2. Sainristil still out of Michigan, the corner, also in round 2. Ben Sinnott, the tight end out of Kansas State, also in round 2 because they had 3 second-round picks. 2 third-round picks, TCU guard Brandon Coleman, a big, powerful offensive lineman, and Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver out of Rice, was the 2nd third-round pick. All 6 of those guys especially if they're right on Daniels, are going to give them something.
Yeah, and right away, honestly. I mean, Jaden Daniels was, outside of Caleb Williams, was my favorite quarterback prospect in the draft, and clearly that's not really much of a hot take considering he went second overall, but for months I've been saying Jaden Daniels is, depending on where he lands, is going to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. Johnny Newton falling to the second round might have been one of the biggest surprises from the first night of the draft. I think everyone thought he was going to land somewhere in the 20s, end of the first round. The fact that he dropped to the second round and the Commanders drafted him to join, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne?
Yeah.
Having those three on the interior, that is a very, very talented interior defensive line group right there.
Very powerful player.
Yeah.
Very, very strong. Just a moose and an ox inside that line.
Yeah, I thought that was a great pick by Washington. Sainer still, I believe, is going to be the slot corner for Washington. We saw what he could do in, I believe it was the national championship game where he had 2 interceptions in the one game alone. Very talented slot corner. And yeah, Ben Sinnott was one of the top tight end prospects. Luke McCaffrey, interesting pick. Obviously, he's got the name recognition with his brother, Christian McCaffrey, being one of the best players in the league.
They need depth at receiver, though.
Yeah, no,
so
they do.
It's a good need pick for them.
Yeah. No, I mean, looking at their entire draft class, it's hard to argue that Adam Peters did very well for his first draft as a general manager.
201-939-4513 is our phone number if you'd like to get through. We've got a line open. I would add this, though, Matt. One thing to keep in mind, and I know in listening to NFL radio on Sirius XM, it's very few teams disappointed their fans this year in the draft. Now, why is that? Well, it's pretty simple. First of all, we knew that it was a top-heavy draft, that the first 3 or 4 rounds had a lot of really good players in it. So it would be pretty hard not to come out of this draft with at least 2 quality picks. At the very minimum, you'd have to really screw it up, okay? Or the players are going to have to be screw-ups or get hurt. But going in, we knew from being out at the Combine, 3 to 4 rounds. In fact, you look at it, you say to yourself, oh, my God, every one of these teams is going to get immediate production. Who's going to be the rookie of the year? Who's going to be the offensive rookie of the year, the defensive rookie of the year? I wouldn't even venture a guess because there are that many good players who were taken in the first 2 rounds that I wouldn't want to take odds on that. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, at least, offensive rookie of the year, I feel like every year the favorites are always going to be the rookie quarterbacks because obviously they touch the ball in every single play. But this year when you have Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers, it wouldn't surprise me if any of those guys won rookie of the year.
How could it?
Yeah.
How could it?
And on the other side with defensive rookie of the year, the first defensive player wasn't even taken until 15. It's not like there was a stud that was taken top 3, top 5 that is clearly the favorite to win it. I think both of them are completely open races this year.
No question. You had a bunch of corners who were taken high in the first couple of rounds. Any one of those guys, if they wind up being a starter, could wind up being the guy. You got a few edge rushers that were taken up high. Any one of those guys could wind up being the defensive rookie of the year. This was a very top-heavy draft, and I think that the league took advantage of it, and they really spread the wealth this season. That's how I saw it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And there was one interesting thing I saw last week leading into the draft that said that most teams around the league had a pretty consensus agreement on the top 50 players or 50 or so players, and that after that, it was sort of like a crapshoot. Like every team just had a completely different, values for different players, and that so from the second half of round 2 till the end of the draft, you would see some guys that the media had projected as late day 3 picks going on day 2, and vice versa.
I think it was even deeper than that, Matt. When we had Arif Hassan on, who used to be with The Athletic and now is with his own football analyst site, he does the compilation of the mock drafts from the most respected mock drafts and comes up with the consensus. He pretty much said that the draft was pretty stable through 160 picks.
Really?
Which is the middle of the 5th round.
Well, in the media's eyes.
Yes, and through draft gurus' eyes. And then he said that's when scattershoot became for the rest of the draft. And when you think about that kind of depth, it'd be shameful for any GM to walk away not feeling pretty good about his take this year.
I would be curious to see how those, consensus mock draft rankings compared to the actual draft.
Yeah, don't have
that. I'd be interested to see.
We'll let you call Arif and find out what happened with that. All right, folks, get on the line, 201-939-4513. We're a tad long with that, but I thought philosophically speaking, it was good to kind of look at the forest and survey what had happened in the NFC East. Remember, you can subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast, long-form interviews, Giants players, coaches, front office folks, past, present, all kinds of NFL dignitaries. You can go to your favorite podcast platform or go to giants.com/podcasts. Always leave a positive review if you can on Apple Podcasts. Helps keep the show around. Giants fans, remember, take your fandom to the next level. There are subscriptions available for the 2024 season year-round. You don't just have to be on game day to be a big fan. You can have year-round all kinds of exclusive member benefits. Visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app is Giants TV. It brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. We've got that stuff out of the way. Now it's up to you folks at 201-939-4513. Give us a call and let's talk some Giants football. We will start the program with line 1. Hugo is in New Jersey. You're first on BBKL. Hello.
Hey, good afternoon, guys.
What's going on?
Hey, Hugo.
Hey, we're a few days now removed from the draft, so you can kind of take a step back and take emotion out of it. I think I like the Giants draft, and the players I loved were Neighbors at 1, Theo Johnson at 4. And, Matt, you may recall that I said if either Blake Corum, Sinat, the other tight end, or Theo Johnson made it to 4th, I would love an opportunity to take one of the 3. Yep. So they took Johnson. And really like Tyrone Tracy as well. I think he has a lot of upside. I would have done a few things differently in this draft. And let me Len from Columbia, Maryland is aligned with me on this. I would have taken Chris Jenkins in the 2nd. I would have taken Chris Haynes, who went 11 picks later. Chris Haynes is an offensive guard from Connecticut. And I would have taken Mekhi Wingo in the 6th, and he went 6 picks later. And I think that would have struck a better balance between outside players and the trenches. I keep going back to my main concern, right? And let me just frame it. The Giants gave up 4.7 yards per rushing attempt last year. That was 31st in the league. And that was with Leonard Williams for half a year and A'Shawn Robinson for the full year. And I don't think they've done anything in the offseason really to address that issue. And my concern is that if teams run it on us, it effectively neutralizes what we perceive as an improved pass rush, because our pass rushers will get less opportunities on 3rd and long, let's say, to rush the passer. So I said this during the draft, I don't know what Joe Shane can do at this point. And part of my thinking in that strategy is that there are better players in the free agent market currently at corner and safety. So I would have drafted those players and then taken my chances in the veteran free agent market for kind of hold the fort guys this year, because I'm really worried this will sabotage. I think this issue is going to sabotage the year. I don't want to give any predictions right now where I think the record will be, because you guys will do that later in the off season. But I'm kind of in the. I'm not. Let's just say I'm not positively inclined. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thanks, Hugo. Appreciate the
Hugo.
call. I think it's a fair comment to say that you're not sure how much the run defense will improve. That's a fair comment. Okay, I believe that the pass rush is going to be better. We don't know how well the secondary will cover because there are still some sketchy areas right now. I think that's fair to say as well. But here's what I would say. We think that Nubin was a really good pick, and he'll at least battle for a starting job. We don't know if he's going to get one or not, but he'll battle. We don't know exactly what the corner opposite Banks is going to turn out to be, but they have some bodies there who can battle. Rush defense. I want to go to that one, Hugo, because I appreciate the concern, but I would say there may be more potential answers here than you think. Now, we know that DJ Davidson is there and Jordan Riley's there to help back up Dexter Lawrence. I mentioned on the show yesterday, and I don't know if you heard it, I think that Ryder Anderson and Boogie Basham may get a chance to try to earn reps at the 3 technique position. Boogie Basham played end and 3 technique at Wake Forest and was really good at it. And when I projected him as a guy I might like to see in the second round of that draft, I thought about that usage. Not so much being an edge guy, but a guy who would be an end in the run game and then bumped inside during the sub package. That's what I saw in him coming out of school. The Bills didn't use him that way.
Nope.
They made him an edge rusher, and he's not an edge pass rusher full time. That's not what he does well. He is not a get-off guy who's going to collapse the pocket from the edge. That's not what he does. So I think he was misused. The Giants pick him up last year from Buffalo, and they make him a linebacker behind Jihad Ward, all right, to be a run-stuffing, set-the-edge backup. I'll be frank with you. I'm not so sure that that's the way to use him either. I think maybe, just maybe, he'll get a chance to become part of that 3 technique competition. And Ryder Anderson, who went all the way up to 290 pounds last year and then didn't get any chances for whatever reason, he bulked up from being defensive end to what I thought would be a perfect frame for a potential 3 technique. And he never got any chances. He's healthy. He's still signed for this season. I'm telling you, don't be surprised if you see Basham or Anderson, or maybe both, work at the 3 technique in training camp. And if they can show anything that I think they can show, they might be able to help that defensive line against the run. You know, and I appreciate the fact that 3 technique is more of a pass rush scheme, but I think these guys are stout enough that they can play the run.
Yeah, no, I agree. And first off, I just want to point out, and I'll continue to do this at least for the next couple of weeks, is that the offseason. I will bring that up. But first, I want to say the offseason is not over. I know I mentioned this on Monday. 4:00 Monday was the deadline, the deadline for free agent signings to count towards the compensatory pick formula for next year.
Correct.
That deadline is now passed. We've already seen across the league a little bit of flurry of moves after free agency slowed down the last couple of weeks before the draft. It's already picked up the last couple of days. So the Giants could still add another veteran free agent. I know, I've seen some of the beat reporters, just pure speculation, but throw out a name, someone like Lawrence Guy, who's still a veteran free agent that's still available, and there are others out there. So they could still add more to the room. But I think, and it was kind of clear from their, lack of moves towards the interior defensive line during the draft, I think that they're planning on at least giving the chance for these young guys to develop. I mean, you mentioned Ryder Anderson. You brought up, DJ Davidson, Jordan Riley. The Giants have spent. Ryder was an undrafted free agent, but the other 2 were late round picks in the last 2 drafts. They have spent some draft capital on the position, and I think it might be the plan to let those guys develop under potentially the best defensive line coach in the NFL, one of the most respected defensive line coaches in the NFL, and Andre Patterson. Give them a chance to sort of grow into a role. I mean, I personally think Jordan Riley showed flashes between the preseason and his limited action last year. I thought he showed flashes of a guy that could develop into a very solid interior defensive tackle. And I mean, you did bring it up a second ago. they did go out and sign Jordan Phillips in free agency. I know he's more of a pass rusher on the interior than a run stuffer, but they did bring him in. I think him and Rakeem Nunez-Roches, who was brought in last year to a multi-year deal, I think the two of them are going to compete to have that starting spot next to Dexter Lawrence. I think they're more bodies in that group and in the mix for those few interior spots than some people, I guess, are really thinking about.
It was not a great three-technique draft. If you didn't get one of the guys up top, it was going to be hard to get somebody who you were really going to be happy with.
Yeah, I mean that Hugo just mentioned, Mekhi Wingo in the 6th round. Like
John and I talked about him too.
Wingo, he could end up being a very good NFL player, but right now, who's to say that taking him in the 6th round, any more luck of him turning out, and turning into a good NFL contributor, more so than G.J. Davidson or Jordan Riley, who were 7th round picks the last 2 years.
201-939-4513 is our number here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. We go to line 2. Scott from New Mexico, you're next on the program. Hello.
Hi, guys. You both made some really excellent and very salient points, and I think the pass rush is going to be fine.
Yeah.
My concern is not that. I'm a big believer, as you know, Paul, in all the tutorials and teachings of Vince Lombardi.
Yep.
And his thing was, I've read almost every book he wrote. Basically, stop the run and run the football.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way you win football games. But my concern is the offensive line and how good or bad that is right now. I was reviewing some of the personnel. I'm just going to start with Slotman and Stinney. Both had not very good grades. But when I looked at their records, they haven't played that many games in totality. And that's the thing that I question, because they're backups. And if they haven't played many games and have gotten very poor grades, I think Stinney has a 56.6 grade and Slotman has a 62.6 grade.
Scott, you know better than to quote those things to me.
I know. I'm just doing it because I just wanted to make the point that they don't have a lot of experience at the positions.
I think Stinney started 1 year and Runyon started 3. Is that right?
Well, with Stinney, he played a total of 31 games and started 12.
Yeah, so it's virtually a season.
Right, and Slotman only started 14 games.
Oh, you're talking about Slotman? I thought you were going to talk about Runyon, who has a few.
No,
years
I'm going
to
talk about
experience.
Runyon in a second.
But
before
we move on to Runyon, I know you're bringing up the PFF grades for Stinney and Slotman. I just want to point out,
JMS is our starting center.
Yeah, no, I'm assuming those two competing for one of the guard spots.
Oh, I don't think so.
I just want to point out, Aaron Stinney, you mentioned his PFF grade, 56.6, on over 440 pass block snaps. He had 442 pass block snaps. He gave up 2 sacks. So I know PFF grades, I use them too sometimes.
Right.
I know that the number 56.6 might not jump out and it might not look that great, but you have to actually look at the actual stats. He was on the field for over 400 pass blocking snaps and only gave up 2 sacks. I mean, I think all of us would sign up for that for one of our offensive
I don't
linemen.
disagree, but he's only played in 31 games totality.
True, but
in 5 years.
The numbers I just mentioned were last year and the first time he's had extensive action as a starter.
Okay, that's a fair point. With Runyon, both of you are aware that in 2023, I think he was moved to right guard.
Yeah.
And when he was moved to right guard, he had given up 10 pressures in 6 games, so Green Bay decided in the last 4 games he split snaps with his backup. I think his name is Shine Ryan. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And when they got to the playoffs, he garnished less than 70% of the snaps in the playoffs. And that, to me, I start to question, because I always thought John Runyon was an excellent player when he was playing at left guard. And they moved him to right guard, and then he started to have some issues. And I'm wondering, even though I still like him and I still admire his ability, that I start to wonder about that, because why did they move him to right guard if he's actually a natural left guard? And then secondarily, he was splitting snaps with his backup. So I question again, not that he's not a good player, but is he the kind of player the Giants need to have? And he's only, I think, 27 or 26.
He's only been in the league 4 years.
Right. So he has. I'm sure with Priscilla, they'll be working on some of that with him. And then when we get to the other positions, the elephant in the room is Evan Neal, whether he's going to make it or not make it. I think Illuminor was an excellent pick. But my overall consensus when I look at the offensive line, because I think that's the crux of whether the Giants are going to have an excellent season or not. Do you feel that, either Paul or you, Matt, that the Giants need to do something else with some offensive linemen in free agency, or do you think they're going to stand pat with what they have? Because Zudo and McKeithen are unknowns as far as I'm concerned because they've been hurt, and I don't know if they can play the position. I know when Zudo was moved to left tackle, he couldn't play it, so he's a natural guard, I'm assuming. And of the 85 sacks that the Giants gave up last year, most of those sacks occurred between the guard and center.
Yeah.
And so those are the strongest positions. I think up the middle, whether it be offense or defense, you have to shore that up. And that's why I'm not so much worried about the defensive line, but I am worried about the offensive line. And so my basic question is to you, and I'll be glad to get off the air to hear your retort, is do the Giants need to do something else? Because I'm not sure they have the right personnel. And if they don't have the right personnel, even though I agree with you they had an excellent draft, I don't know. I think it'll go for naught unless they can strengthen that to a degree where they're not going to be susceptible to having Daniel Jones back there and going through the same malaise he went through last year.
All right, Scott.
Glad to take your answers off the air.
Thank you
again, guys.
All right, couple things here, I think, as we dive into this. First of all, I think if the Giants are going to add any veteran free agents on the line, I think it would probably be at tackle, not at guard. One of the reasons is the room right now is overcrowded at guard.
Yep.
They've got a lot of options there. We don't know who's going to step up and take the jobs, whether it's McKeithen, whether it's Zudu, whether it's Runyon, whether Illuminor winds up being a guard, or everybody says, oh, Neal should be a guard. Whoever it turns out to be, they're overflowing with guards right now. So if you want to sign a veteran tackle, I would not be adverse to that. I would not be surprised about that, because right now, who are your backup tackles? If Neal and Thomas start, well, Illuminor right now would be your other obvious option at tackle.
Yeah.
Who's your next option if you don't want to move him?
Matt Nelson.
Right. And Matt Nelson, to me, is just a guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's just been in the league for 4 years, limited action in those 4 years.
Just a guy.
He's basically was serving as, the Lions' swing tackle, backup tackle for the last couple seasons.
See, here's the problem. Let's say Neal does win the right tackle spot. Illuminor is going to compete at right guard if Neal holds the spot. So now Neal gets hurt, and we know he's been hurt a lot. So let's say he gets hurt. Do you want to rock the boat and move Illuminor out there and now two positions change? Or do you just throw Matt Nelson out there? Are we just automatically giving Matt Nelson that third tackle spot? My point is, I would want competition there. I would not just give him that tackle spot. Rather than moving Illuminor out, I wouldn't just give it to Nelson. I wouldn't mind seeing the Giants get another tackle if there's anybody out there who possibly can compete with Nelson to see, because I don't think Nelson automatically deserves that spot to me.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a fair point. He hasn't, hasn't had that much playing time since he entered the NFL a couple years ago. So I agree with you. If they were to add to the offensive line, I do think it will be the tackle position, because they brought, as you mentioned, Runyon, Illuminor, who at the very least has a chance at competing for one of the starting guard spots, depending on what happens with Evan Neal at right tackle. Aaron Stinney, Austin Schlottman, and then you have Azudu, who was a third-round pick 2 years ago, McKeithen, who was a fifth-round pick 2 years ago. As you mentioned, there are a lot of bodies on the interior line. Of course, John Michael Schmitz as well, who is the starting center.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. If they do bring someone in, I think it'll be someone more in the, in the form of a player like, Tyree Phillips, who is still a free agent, obviously coming back from, he had a pretty serious injury at the very end of the season. So, I mean, maybe that's a situation.
Free agent, by the way.
Yeah, I'm saying maybe that's a situation where, the front office is waiting to see him a little further along in his recovery. And if he's doing well, maybe they have interest in bringing him back. And I think everyone would be pretty happy if, that move was made, because in his limited action, Tyree Phillips has been pretty solid for the Giants the last couple seasons.
He was. 201-939-4513 is our phone number. Lines are open right now if you'd like to get in, especially if it's your first-time caller. We always like to hear new people. My thought, though, is that these last two calls, they did touch on the two soft spots, or two of the three soft spots right now on this team. We are not 100% sure how that defensive line is going to shake out next to Dexter Lawrence. And we are not 100% sure how this offensive line is going to shake out, starting five, or for that matter, numbers 6 and 7. We really don't know for sure.
I feel like the reason why fans are a little more cognizant of those two positions in particular now is just because the Giants didn't use any draft picks on them. But, let's not forget, it was less than 2 months ago the free agency opened, and
they got bodies.
The Giants signed multiple interior offensive linemen right out of the gate. Runyon, Illuminor, Stinney, Schlotman. So it's not like they haven't brought guys in.
They got bodies.
They chose, for the guys to compete for those backup spots, they chose to bring in veterans instead of taking another chance in the draft, because they've already done that the last couple years in the draft. So I don't blame them for wanting to go the veteran route, guys that have already been in the NFL and have proven that they are capable, if called upon, to jump into the starting lineup and compete and play well. So I don't blame that. The interior defensive line, I can somewhat understand, because as the first caller mentioned, the Giants traded away Leonard Williams, A'Shawn Robinson signed with the Panthers. So right now you have a group, Dexter Lawrence, obviously all-pro right there, but then next to him, Jordan Phillips, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, Jordan Riley, DJ Davidson, Ryder Anderson. Phillips definitely has a lot of experience in the NFL, as does Nacho, but not extensive experience starting. I mean, Phillips has just had some injury concerns the last couple seasons, but, Nacho has definitely been more of a, I don't want to say reserve, but somewhat utility defensive lineman, not playing every snap. And then the 2 7th-round picks in the recent years, Davidson and Riley, obviously have not had a lot of playing time at all since they entered the NFL. So that position, I can somewhat understand the slight concerns, but I also don't think it's calls for that much concern when one of the two starting spots at that position is already filled by an all-pro who's the best player on the team.
Understood.
I think when you have a guy that talented at one spot, not saying you could just completely ignore the other spot, but I don't think you have to spend, as high of assets, whether it's draft or free agency, salary cap money, on that second spot.
The third position, to a lesser degree, would be corner. We don't, again, bodies are in the room.
A lot of bodies.
Including Trey Hawkins from last year. Bodies are in the room. At least they addressed the corner spot, though, specifically slot corner in all likelihood.
Yeah.
By
as
picking
Joe
up
mentioned,
Andrew Phillips from Kentucky in the 3rd round, which is just about where the corners started to get really thin.
Yeah.
So at least they did draft somebody there to enhance the youth and the potential of that room. That would be the third kind of a little sketchy spot for me right now.
For me, that would probably honestly be the number one spot.
Above the other two.
In terms of priorities, yes, for me. I think Deonte Banks showed a lot in his rookie season and was asked to do a lot more than most rookie cornerbacks are asked to do. I mean, he was put out on an island and told to, one-on-one guard some of the top wide receivers in the NFL each and every week. I mean, he had such a tough gauntlet of number one receivers that he went up against. And look, he got beat sometimes, but he also held his own a lot of the time. So very encouraged by him. But the second spot, on the second outside corner spot, as we've just mentioned, there are a lot of bodies. And I wouldn't, it's not the worst thing if, they just go in and want guys like, Cordell Flott, Trey Hawkins, Nick McLeod to compete for that second spot. I mean, those guys were all brought in for a reason, and it's because the front office believes that they can, hold down that cornerback position. But I think it would behoove the defense to go out if there are any cap space cleared, whether it's a decision from Darren Waller in the future or contract restructures. Me personally, that would probably be the first position I would look to fill with a veteran. There are some very solid veteran cornerbacks still available. I mean, depending on how much the Giants would be willing to spend at that position would define what type of player they bring in. But Stephen Gilmore, Steven Nelson, who else is there? Well, those are two of the bigger name guys. But Witherspoon, who's with the Rams,
that's the guy that I would target, because Witherspoon, and I was just looking up his money last year. He made just over $1 million last year. He's 29 years old. He's been in this league now for a number of years, and he's one of the very few corners in this league who are 6'2" and taller. Although we're getting some taller guys in the last couple of years. But he's a tall, long corner. Been with San Francisco and Pittsburgh and the Rams. And over the years, he's had a number of interceptions, 11 picks in his 7-year career. Started for, all of last year with the Rams. Economically, see, because I don't know when you're talking about how much money you're going to have to maybe add a vet. Let's just say that Waller is coming back for a minute. You don't have a whole lot of nickels and dimes to spend. So you're going to have to probably go to somebody who's going to be about $1 million or so. You're not going to have much more.
I don't personally think the Giants are going to get into the mix for guys like Gilmore, who are going to command a lot more money.
That's the problem.
I fully agree with you on that.
So if you gotta go cheap, and you want somebody who's had some success in the league, and has shown the ability to start if necessary. I mean, remember when they picked up Fabian Moreau a couple years ago?
He was great.
He was
great.
And by the way, he's a free agent too. The Broncos, his contract is up. Fabian Moreau's
Let's
out
not
there
forget,
again.
Fabian Moreau was brought in after the start of the season.
Yeah.
To play the second corner.
He was inactive.
To play the second corner spot opposite Adoree Jackson.
Right.
And until Adoree got hurt, Fabian Moreau was playing great. He was playing outstanding football, and everyone is calling him one of the steal free agent signings, even of the year. Now, once Adoree got hurt and all of a sudden Moreau was pushed to the number one corner spot, then his play started, to falter a little bit. But he was great up until Adoree got hurt. And I think that is the type of, veteran player that the front office could look to bring in to play opposite Deonte Banks at this point.
And again, economically, he's going to be friendly.
Yes,
he's not going to try to run the numbers up on you.
No, look, if the Giants were to go out and sign anyone at this point, chances are it's not going to be someone for big money. Right. I mean, you never know with signings. You never know with trades. Trades could still happen.
Well, I don't think they're going to redo anybody's contracts that they have currently on the team. I don't think that's happening to create any room. I think you're pretty much where you are with the deals you've signed.
I mean, look, Joe has made it very clear that he does not like restructuring contracts.
He does not.
He does not like pushing cap hits to the future.
And they already just did Dexter.
They did do Dexter. Room. I wouldn't be surprised if there is somewhat of a restructure for someone. I mean, someone like Andrew Thomas, who's not going anywhere anytime soon. I could see that. Bobby Okereke. That is if they need to clear some money to clear, some cap space. Because you need money to sign your free agent class. Your rookie class, yes. Which I believe the cap space that a lot of people are reporting the Giants currently have is just enough to sign the 6-person draft class.
If true, it's very thin.
Yeah, but as Joe, as any GM will tell you, you need some money to operate during the season as well.
No doubt.
So I think that would require, at least one contract restructure at some point. It doesn't have to be now. It could be, going into training camp. It could be going into week 1. That's not something that could happen or has to happen immediately.
201-939-4513. We have about 10 minutes left on the show. If you want to give us a call, tell us what position you think the Giants might want to add a veteran. Okay, whether or not you think it'll be inexpensive or maybe try to find a little more money. Do you think it's D-line? Do you think it's offensive line? You think it's corner? Or maybe you think something else. We're certainly willing to talk about it. Let me go back to you for a second, though, about what you were just saying a second ago. In terms of the roster construction, because of the rules now, since COVID, where you're allowed to promote practice squad guys, you get 2 every Sunday. Remember now, and every time you do that, it costs you a little change.
Yep.
You got to reach into the piggy bank, and you got to get those nickels and those dimes and those quarters out. So it's not just saying, okay, you want to have X number of bucks during the course of the season because you may need to go replace somebody. No, that's not the only requirement. That money, whatever you got in that piggy bank, is also going to have to take care of your weekly 2 extra activations.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that for sure, but I also think you definitely want to clear cap space because obviously right now, May 1st, no one knows how the Giants season is going to go. I mean, 2 years ago, I would say not a lot of people expected the Giants to go on that playoff run. And last year, I don't think that many people expected, what happened in the first half of the season to happen to the Giants. So
Right.
You want to give yourself some space to make moves, whether it's, like last year trading away Leonard Williams to pick up a second-round pick. What if the Giants get off to a great start this season and decide they want to be on like the other end of a situation like that, where they want to go out and trade for, a player of the caliber of Leonard Williams, not Leo in particular, but
Right.
a player of that caliber? You want to have the cap space to be able to absorb the money and make it work. So you need to have, I guess different GMs would say different amount of money, but you need to have at least a couple million in cap space to get through the season. And that is even before talking about a potential big move like trading for a proven good veteran player.
To go full circle on this point, it actually goes back to something we talked about very early in the show about some of these maybe thin spots. Do you go out at this time and use whatever wiggle room money you might have to bring in a veteran? Or do you say, you know what? We're going to go through spring drills and we're going to go into training camp and we're going to give guys like DJ Davidson and Boogie Basham and Ryder Anderson chances to prove themselves because they're already here. They're cheap. They're under contract. Save whatever tiny room you might have to put it towards something you might need during the season when, if you get off to a good start, you may need a reinforcement. Maybe you don't want to blow whatever extra nickels and dimes you have going into camp. Maybe you just want to hold it and hope that, you know what? Maybe Darian Beavers coming off a full year of injury rehab off his horrible knee. Maybe Darian Beavers has a great training camp and proves he can help you on special teams and also maybe help you short yardage run or goal line defense. Because a couple years ago, before he got hurt, blew out his knee, he looked like a really stout inside linebacker.
He was the standout of the 2022 training camp.
He was going to get a starting job.
Oh, yeah. That was a very unfortunate injury that happened.
So, remember, new defensive coordinator here, too. Okay? Anything that Wink Martindale wanted to do over the last 2 years, that's kind of out the window now. Shane Bowen's got a fresh set of eyes looking at the tape, looking at these guys, meeting these guys, talking to these guys. I'll give you a great example of how things change, right? Talking to Isaiah Simmons at the end of last year, he started to play really well the final month of the season. They were using him more. He was a coverage linebacker, but they started using him more on the blitz. And he was making some plays, okay? He looked like he was an ascending player. It took him almost a whole year for the Giants to figure out not only how to use him, but also for him to get familiar with everybody and to start finding a rhythm. So Wink Martindale's out as the Giants DC, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, great. Here you got Isaiah Simmons. They won't give up a 7th-round pick for him. But the guy's got a tremendous amount of ability and talent. I really would love to see him grow here and develop here. But he's a guy whose primary function, again, is coverage or blitz. Wink was a blitz-happy DC. He left. If the new guy doesn't have use for what Simmons does, you might, prefer somebody else because he's a very specific kind of guy, even though he's a great athlete. It's those two things that he does really, really, really well. Okay? He is not your standard weak side linebacker who's going to track down the run all over the field or charge the line of scrimmage and get a tackle for a loss on a running play. That's not his forte. He's a blitzer or he's a coverage guy. Those are his two best traits. And I'm thinking, what if the new defensive coordinator doesn't really have value for those traits or use for those traits? And what if Simmons says to himself, you know what? I know what my best two traits are. I can take them out onto the league and shop them. And I'm going somewhere else because that's the stuff that I'm good at and somebody else is going to want to use that more than the new guy is here. So I didn't think he was going to make it back. I really didn't. Shortly after Shane Bowen got named defensive coordinator, we know what his track record is of not being a heavy blitzer. I figured, well, now for sure, there's no way Simmons is coming back. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, deal gets done, Isaiah Simmons is back. So I saw Isaiah about a week after he re-signed. I said, wow, I'll be frank, I didn't think that you would come back. I'm glad, but I didn't think so. He goes to me, I really like it here. I wanted to be here. I talked to Shane Bowen, the new defensive coordinator. I liked what he said. We're on the same page. I really wanted to come back. I did not want to leave. So that's why I re-signed. He's only 1 year deal.
Yep.
But that's why he re-signed. Sometimes, it's the stuff that we don't know, and we still don't know very much about what Shane Bowen wants to do with the Giants in 2024. That's the mystery that really impacts a lot of decisions that we can't even forecast.
Yeah, I mean, with Simmons in particular, I agree that I was a little surprised to see him return because, as you mentioned, he has a specific skill set, and it's not one that, off the top of my head,
a 22% blitzing coordinator is probably not going to use him.
I wouldn't think necessarily that he would fit into the type of defense Shane Bowen wants to run, but clearly I was wrong because you don't make that move to bring him back unless Shane Bowen has in his mind a specific plan, an idea of how to use Isaiah Simmons. So I'm personally excited to see what Bowen wants to do with Simmons in particular. But yeah, as you mentioned, Shane Bowen is very, very different defensive scheme than Wink Martindale. Completely different. Wink Martindale had either the highest or the second highest blitz rate in the NFL last year, while the Titans defense under Bowen was one of the lowest in blitz percentage. So, and we saw the difference between the two schemes in some of the moves the Giants made this offseason.
Sure.
I mean, if Wink Martindale were still the defensive coordinator here, I don't think that trade for Brian Burns gets done.
No.
Because Shane Bowen's defense relies on a four-man rush, so you need your two edge rushers to hit home a lot more often than if you have 5-6 guys blitzing every play like under Wink Martindale. And same with Drew Phillips, the third-round pick. I mean, Shane Bowen likes play a lot of time zone coverage, while Wink Martindale likes the secondary press man coverage.
Bingo.
Phillips is not a lot better, but he's better in zone coverage than he is in press man coverage. So you can see that Bowen's defense, his system, has already had an impact on at least some of the personnel decisions that the front office made over the last couple of months.
I'll give you another curiosity that I have, and we're just about out of time, folks. So, again, appreciate you listening to the program today. I'll give you something else to watch for. I'll be looking for it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm going to keep my eyes out and my radar going to be on for this. What about in the sub-package, you see Dexter Lawrence as the only down lineman on some situations, third and long, and now you got standing up Thibodeau, Burns, and Simmons up on the line. And now, okay, if you're going to double team Dexter, that means Simmons, Burns, and Thibodeau are all one-on-one. Right? You had 5 against 4, double team Dexter Lawrence. Now it's one-on-one matchups for those other 3 guys. And the offensive coordinator doesn't know if Simmons is coming or covering. How about that? This is what I spend up nights doing. I spend nights diagramming this stuff as if I'm a coordinator. Been doing it a long time, folks. That's why I get headaches all the time. So I've been playing around with that. And I wonder if we might see some of that somehow in the playbook.
Yeah, I think the Giants have some very, very interesting personnel, especially along the front seven, where Shane Bowen can get very creative with how he wants to set up the pass rush, especially on, as you said, passing situations, third and longs.
Remember this. Dable and Shane both continue to stress versatility in the acquisitions that they brought in.
Oh, yeah.
Even more so than when we had Wake Martindale here last year. They continue to stress that. Versatility. We've heard that word so many times. I mean, all right, maybe they won't be, quote, blitz happy, but that doesn't mean we're not going to see a lot of different looks and pieces moving around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just look at the draft class alone. Versatility could be used to describe almost every single member of the 6-person draft class. You have Malik Neighbors, who excels both outside and in the slot. Drew Phillips, who split his time almost 50-50 between the slot and outside corner last year. Tyrone Tracy, a converted wide receiver who is now a pretty dominant running back. I mean, versatility.
It's all over it.
It's all over.
Did you say Newman?
I didn't even say Newman, no. But Newman,
who's all over the place.
He's all over the field. Can read the quarterback's eyes probably better than anyone in this entire draft class. So, yeah, versatility I feel like has been a big theme for, Joe Shane and Brian Dable since they arrived.
Yep.
But this offseason in particular, they seem to Jermaine Illuminor also.
Yep.
I mean, Runyon, the 2 guard spot. I mean, you can go through almost all the guys that were brought in this offseason. Versatility is a word that can be described almost all of them.
It is all over the place with this team. Well, that'll do it for today's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We are so glad that you could join us today. Again, we're here every weekday from 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time till 1:30 live, or you could always catch an archive of this show on Giants broadcast platforms, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcasts. For Matt Citak, I keep getting this
Every
wrong.
once in a while.
Every once in a while it slips in because we called them that for so long in other places in the building. I'm Paul Dottino. This has been Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. We'll see you next time.